What's up everyone? My name is Garrett from Gun Gamers, and I'm here today to review the ML-36 from Tactical Game Innovations, or better known as TAGINN. Now, I only have one outing under my belt with this, however, I've fired probably 30 to 40-ish shots out of it, so I feel like that's a pretty good opportunity to understand how it works, how it operates, and what my thoughts are. However, I do know that I don't have a ton of long-term durability experience with it, but I do feel I can talk to the pros and cons and allow people to make an educated decision on whether or not they want to buy something like this. Because, as everyone probably knows, this is not cheap. This is $750 retail price. I bought it with my own money along with a number of projectiles, which you see back there. I've been working with TAGINN type shells for 3 years to 4 years now. So the ML-36 definitely has some unique characteristics which we'll talk about. I definitely have good points, things I'm neutral about, and bad things that I don't necessarily like about it. We'll cover all that here in the review. Alright, so before we get into the good, bad, and neutral things that I like about it, I just kind of wanted to give an overall impression that I got from taking this out of the box. This thing is incredibly solid built. Most of the parts on this are aluminum. I'm going to point at the camera. You can see how thick the wall is on the barrel, so this is a really sturdy piece of equipment. Nothing on this feels flimsy whatsoever. The propellant is on board with the launcher itself. So they have this quick system. So you pull off this cap and you just drop a 12-gram CO2 cartridge in the front. Secure the cap, if I can get it. There we go. Secure that back on, and then you pick up the leaf sight and then pull it back like that, and that's what actually pierces it. And then you fold it back down and you're ready to go. It's charged, it's ready to fire. It mounts to a standard 20mm 1913 rail. It has these little thumb screws to allow you to adjust it. So you slide it on from the front and then you tighten these down. If you need to adjust the tension, or if you have something in the way from these levers, you can actually pick these levers up, rotate them, so that way you can get the correct tightness onto the rail grabber feature, so that way you can attach it rigidly as possible. I have yet to find a rail system that I was able to mount this to that it does not stay rigidly attached. This is a very solid piece of equipment. Now, of course, TAGINN does a really good job with their packaging. So the box I have right here, it comes with the launcher. It comes with 5 of the shells, which are required in order to fire it, which is really nice because I was not expecting it to come with any of these, or at least 1, maybe 2, but actually including 5. That's a really good starter set out of the box. It comes with a user manual, which is really nice, and the English on it is pretty good, especially for being a Russian-made manual. Also comes with a catalog for 2019. For 2020, they've updated a number of different things, so this is a little bit out of date, but still, it's nice, good quality paper that comes with it. It also came with 2 patches, which is really nice. There's an OD and a tan, so you can use it on whatever loadout you want. And then one of the things that I really like about it is it comes with a complete seal kit. So it has all the seals for the launching mechanism, so in the event that something fails, you have all the parts to be able to refurbish it. And these are all the common areas where all the big sealing CO2 mechanism is involved with. You can see the plunger type design. Let's get close to that. You can see how the design is kind of set up. It's very similar to how their TAGINN shells work, except they're just incorporated into the launcher itself as opposed to being a separate shell component. So this was a pleasant surprise, really, because I know TAGINN sells this as a separate package, but to include it in the launcher itself is really nice, and I think it adds good value for the product, considering the price. Alright, so let's talk about the good things that I like about it. Obviously, I said the construction is nice and robust from the beginning. Everything is really well built. I can see this taking some really serious abuse. Of course, I haven't treated mine quite as rough, as you can see. But it's a solid piece of kit, especially out of the box. I highly doubt something is going to break out of the box. Second point I want to talk about is the consistency. So the manual says that you can get up to 8 shots on the launcher before you have to change out the CO2 cartridge, and within those 8 shots, it's really consistent. The CO2 is brought down to kind of a pre-chamber, and then when you pull the trigger, you're actually only dumping the CO2 pressure out of that one particular chamber. So it allows it to constantly fill, and then you're only sending so much of the CO2 cartridge out, as opposed to trying to dump the whole thing and then having to reload the whole system for one shot. In reality, I was getting 6 to 8 shots before having to reload, so it's pretty close, but still not 100%. I found that once I got to the 8th shot, that's when I started to lose velocity. By the 9th shot, it was really weak. I was getting half-strength shots. So you definitely have to replace it at or before 8 shots are fired through it, which is still pretty good. I mean, that's a lot of firepower before you have a relatively quick reloading system. If you have any residual pressure inside, because you don't want to twist this off and then like send the CO2 flying out the front. That's what this silver button is here. So you press on that and it slowly vents out the extra pressure from the launcher. That's a really nice feature that I like about this. Quarter turn, pop that right off. Old CO2 falls out. I didn't have one get stuck in here or anything, and I think that's because when you go to load it again, you put the new CO2 cartridge in, you throw this cap back on, you flip the sight up, and then you actually pull back on it, and that's what pierces it. So when you bring the sight back after piercing the cartridge, it actually retracts the plunger that pierces it, and that allows the CO2 cartridge to be nice and floating inside of here, and it's not like other CO2 chargers where you have to worry about the needle sticking inside the CO2 cartridge and then you're having to muscle it out or send a rocket across the room. I made one of the longest shots I've ever been able to make with this launcher. The manual says 170 meters is the longest shot that you can reasonably take with this. So the longest shot I made with this was 210 yards, and that translates to 192 meters. Now this is a 70-degree day, very open, flat land. The sight is graduated up to 150 meters, but I just kind of winged it, and I was able to get that good of a shot.
Eyes up, guys. Let's see if he does this. If he does, I owe him money. Toby.
Oh, he's waving at us.
Oh, that went over.
Bye! Bye!
Oh. Damn.
Was it short or too high?
Short. An air burst.
They should still be dead though.
Oh my God, you got them! Woo! You have made my weekend. Thank you. Thank you. I owe you a case.
Now that was with a pyrotechnic shell. It was actually with one of these guys, which they have a 4.5 second timer on them, so it's a really long flight time to be able to use those. And I managed to wipe out probably half a squad. I airbursted it over their head, and the guys called it. So I will say, it's a really lucky shot. I was just happy to have attempted it, but the fact that I actually did get hit calls out with people, absolutely phenomenal. Another good thing that I like about it, like I said earlier in the packaging, it comes with 5 shells. They sell, it's these little casing type things, which you load up one of the projectiles like so. They're nice and tight, so it stays that way. With that though, because it comes with 5, they sell extra of the shell casings. You can see I have one right here. They come in packs of 12. I don't think you necessarily need to, out of the box, buy these, because some of the projectiles... So it's a nice sliding fit on these, but they're not... It's actually tight. Like, if I shake this, it's not going to fall out whatsoever. You actually have to use a bit of muscle to get the two apart. But some of the shells that I used, you could just slide them in and they practically fall out. So I guess I'm not really sure about what the reasoning for that is. I have a feeling it's kind of the old gen versus new gen type of shells. But for the most part, these are a nice press fit in there, and you can do it by hand. And if you need to, at the end of the day, pull them apart, you can do it with two hands. It's not something crazy. When you're loading the shell, you push this button on the side here, and that opens up this nice metal latch. When you're loading the projectile in, though, you have to line up the rifling before you fully seat it into. So you can't just jam a projectile in here. You actually have to set it in, find out where the rifling grooves line up, and then press it in. But I'm not going to actually load it right here, but I will put the empty casing in. So it'll sit, you'll have the rim of the case sticking out just like that, and allows you to adjust it. And then once you get it finally adjusted, you push it in nice and flat, and then it's secured just like that. Really nice. And then the casings fall out of the launcher really easy. If not, there are these cuts right here that allow you to pull the shells out. I didn't have a problem. Every time I opened this, it just fell right out. So that's really nice for quick reloads. But coming with 5, I feel like in a reasonable engagement with this, you are able to reload those 5 really quickly in order to be able to continue using the launcher. It's not like, oh, you only have 5, you need to buy more. You don't have to buy more of these, although they are relatively inexpensive to get. I ended up buying 24 additional ones because I wasn't sure it was going to come with any. I figured it was at least coming with 1, maybe 2. I expected 3, but to include 5, I think was a nice surprise. Another good thing that I want to talk about is, of course, earlier when we were in the packaging, it comes with the O-rings to replace it, and TAGINN has a full instruction set video on their YouTube channel, so that way you can take the mechanism apart in order to replace those seals when they eventually do go bad. They are consumable, of course, just like with the TAGINN shells themselves. So you do have to replace them once they start leaking, but in the 30 to 40 shots that I had with this, I didn't notice any leaking or anything like that. Another thing that I do kind of like about this, which is kind of a ding on other launchers I have, like the M320 from Iron Airsoft / S&T, because it doesn't have a pistol grip on it. Now that could be kind of good and bad. On the one hand, you're not using the magazine or the magazine well or some type of other part of the rifle in order to grip it and use this properly. With the M320s, you do have the pistol grip, but the advantage to that is the launcher can sit closer to the receiver, and that, I think, allows your hand position to fit right where it needs to be. Okay, so I've got this mounted onto my WE MSK, which is their clone of the ACR, and this is one of the things that I do like about it, is because it sits the launcher so far back, it allows you to get a good purchase on the front of it when you're carrying it around. It makes it a little bit more comfortable. With the M320, you have to sit it so much further out, so you're either kind of cradling the pistol grip like this in order to hold on to it, or you're really extending your arm far out. So I like that about the ML-36, in that it brings the launcher closer so the balance isn't as bad. I mean, because you're adding 3 pounds to the front of any rifle that you have. Alright, on to the neutral stuff about this launcher. Like I said in the consistency portion earlier, you're only getting 6 to 8 really good shots before you have to reload it. Now, you can use this standalone with an adapter set that allows you to slide a stock in, so then you have a pistol grip and a stock, and the stock allows you to put more CO2 cartridges in it, so that way you get more shots before you have to change out the cartridges. And then there's actually an air stock option, so you can run a 13 cubic inch HPA bottle onto it, so you can get something like 20 shots before you have to change it, or something crazy like that. I personally don't like that system, simply because the stock sticks out so far. At that point, it pretty much becomes a primary weapon. It's so large, it's so bulky for me to use. I'd much rather use it standalone. And truth be told, 6 to 8 shots, I haven't had an issue with that being the limiting factor. The manual does say 8. I think comfortably 6, and then typically I'd fire 6 or 7 shots, and then I'd dump the extra CO2 and then replace it. Or if I wasn't sure what shot number I was on, I would just replace the CO2. The CO2 cartridges, of course, are really cheap, or they're really inexpensive, so I didn't necessarily mind going through a bunch of them in a day. This launcher is, of course, based on an actual product. It is based on the, I'm probably going to screw up the naming of this, the Madrich Weapon Technology ML-40. And it actually says, well, it says military simulation use only here, MWT Austria. So this is based on a real grenade launcher. I don't think there's a military unit that has adopted the use of this launcher, though. But the thing I do like about this is it combines both the features of the M203 in the sleek look of it, and the ability, of course, to bring it close to the pistol grip, so its balance is a little bit better, and the swing out side breech of the M320. So it is based on a real design. If someone says it's not based on a real launcher, it really is. And there's actually trademarks on the box, in addition to the slight little trademarks on the side here that tell you that, yes, it is a base product. So on to the bad stuff. The number one issue I had with this is kind of related to the mounting. On the one hand, you can mount this to anything because it does have this rail grabber feature on here, but it kind of limits what guns you can put it on, because the sight only sticks out so far. Alright, so I've got this attached in roughly the position. I'm working on the gun itself, so I just have the upper receiver, but I don't need the rest of it in order to illustrate my point here. If you look how close the sight actually sits to the rail, in fact, you can't really get any rail cover or rail panel on the side here. Now, that's not necessarily that big of a deal, but what I do have issue with is if you look at the top here, there's not a lot of offset distance from the sight system to the top rail. So it really restricts what kinds of things you can put up here. I mean, there's some sling mounts, you can put some other things on here, like maybe a pressure pad you could fit up here, but of course having the launcher on here is going to be tough to use it. But you can't put a PEC 15 or one of the larger laser units on top at the 12 o'clock like you ideally should do. In fact, when you look on the side here, and I move these levers out of the way, because you can actually, like I said earlier, you can pull up on these and move them in the right orientation in order to tighten them. You can see how close the launcher is to the rail, so that really restricts what kinds of things can go on the side here. I'll throw up a picture at MSATO. I had an FMA PEC 15 on the side of this, and you can see kind of it's in a strange position. Normally you want to put a laser unit or a flashlight way far forward in order to make it usable, so you're not flooding the muzzle or anything like that, but it's really difficult to do that with this launcher because everything's so tight to the rail system. And it's not just this particular upper. I know this is kind of a special one because this is the GMP Lewis Machine and Tool MRP upper receiver. For a standard M4, you also have the same issues. It's really close to the rail. In fact, you can't use the standard KAC rail covers. So you're just about touching the rail here. And of course, I had it mounted to the ACR. I had to have the charging handle on the opposite side to be able to use it, so it wasn't in the way of the sight. And it just barely fit, and I couldn't quite get the quarter turn needed for the CO2 exchanger. So you have to have a really close fitting rail. Now, on most of your M4 rail systems, it's probably going to work just fine, but it kind of restricts it being used on some other guns because of how the rail is designed. You can kind of see how tall the sight is as well. So some of the other rails that maybe are a little bit more even, the sight might sit above, but it does take up a lot of space, and it does take up real estate that prevents you from using some accessories. So that's my number one issue with it, is like I like using kind of semi-space guns. So not being able to use the ACR with this is kind of, it's a bit of a bummer, but it does fit every M4 that I have, so that's fine. The other issue that I kind of have with it is because of the way the system is built with the rail grabber off to this side and the sight onto this side, you can't reverse which side this stuff is on. Sometimes I like to run the leaf sight on the opposite side. I've kind of gotten into that habit with the M320 because that's how they issue it to the US Army. They issue it with the folding iron sights on this side, but they're also reversible. So you can put it on the right side, or you can put it on the left side, which would be traditional for most people. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that this mechanism is kind of directional because of the way they have it designed. Not being able to put it on this side is just slightly limiting, I think, because I would much rather have it a little bit out of the way so I could kind of bring it closer to my body. But it would also make it slightly more difficult to use the leaf sight off to the side as well. Just something I've noticed trying to mount it on some different guns. It does restrict you. Alright, so I've got this on a true M4 upper receiver. This is 14.5 inch barrel. I'm working on this as a blank fire gun for Task Force Keg. And you can see how close this is. You can see this is really designed to work around a standard M4 handguard without any rail panels or anything on it at all. You can't put a PEC 15 on top here. I don't have one to show you guys. And then, of course, on the back here, the only place to put it is situated really far back here, which isn't ideal for how you're supposed to use that system. So while it does mount, you can see how much clearance is there. It's not a ton. I think the sighting system could come out 1/4 of an inch, and that would really greatly open up the kinds of guns that you could put this on. I know this was probably intended for the M4 rifle, but opening up the number of guns that you can put it on, I think would allow people more opportunity to be able to use it. Because I like mixing stuff up. I like using different guns. I have more than just M4s. My final thoughts on the TAGINN ML-36. Yes, it is expensive. It's a $750 grenade launcher. But if you're going to consider buying 10 of these, or even 8 of these, I would strongly consider the ML-36 as well. It's a lot of money to drop at once, but you're getting a very robust, very consistent launcher that the quick CO2 system makes it really painless to refill, and the capabilities that having a launcher like this brings. I made an almost 200 meter shot with this on a 70-degree day. I consider that a pretty average day. This thing is really capable. Unless you need something specific for an impression, I would strongly suggest if you're looking at a grenade launcher and you're willing to spend the money on tag-ins and projectiles and the system as a whole, definitely worth the money, if you ask me. TAGINN, I hope you're watching this video, and I hope you stand this off a quarter of an inch so that way folks can use it on other guns. But other than that, I don't have too many other things to complain about this launcher. Guys, if you really like this video, give us a like and a favorite. If you disagree with me or perhaps have other thoughts on this particular very expensive grenade launcher, leave a comment down below. And of course, subscribe for more content from Gun Gamers. My name is Garrett, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this video from Gun Gamers. We hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. Check the description below if you'd like to buy a t-shirt or a patch, and use the coupon code JUDY10 for 10% off of your next order at Amped Airsoft. Thank you again for watching, and praise Judy.